This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Coming up on This Week in Agribusiness, farmers from around the country and around the world gathered in Grand Island, Nebraska for Husker Harvest Days. Hello folks, thanks for tuning in to This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson here in the studio today. This past week was a busy week for ag news. On Monday, we started with the World Agricultural Supply and Demand estimates really changing the supply and demand tables for the soybean market. And then we saw a rail strike percolate throughout the week. A lot of issues causing the markets to move rather volatilely. In the meantime, farmers shrugged that off and gathered together in Grand Island, Nebraska to take a look at some of the newest innovations, the newest products, and really the newest technology available in the world of agriculture. Max Armstrong had a chance to be in Grand Island, and he caught up with a lot of the folks who were on the grounds.
Yeah, Mike, they were lined up behind the ropes at Husker Harvest Days to see the equipment on the move, and yes, the weather cooperated in a big way. Not just in terms of the field demonstrations, the capability to have the crop ready, but also at showtime with plenty of sunshine, a good breeze, good warm weather, and it was perfect for all of the folks who wanted to attend this show. It hasn't been perfect, though, all year long for weather conditions, as you know, in Nebraska.
We started out cold here around April. Shut the water off and just poured it to it with the pivots. Dryland corners are, doing 86 bushel underneath the pivots where we had good water. 220, 225 for a short season corn, 95, 98 day.
During the growing season, there were some hailstorms that came across this part of the country. Did you get hit here?
By the grace of God, we missed it by 3 miles. It was 3 miles east of us. There was probably 12 or 15 pivots flipped over, fields replanted, everything, for somehow we missed it.
It was a fairly long strip too, wasn't it, through eastern Nebraska?
Yeah, it went all the way from here, all the way to York, down to Beatrice, and there was 2 of them. There was 2 different storms, one in May and then another one sometime in, I think, middle of June.
Well, in Nebraska specifically, we've had a good share of drought across much of the state. There are pockets in the middle of the Sand Hills, a little bit in the southeast and south central counties that have caught some decent rain, but much of the state is 50% of normal precipitation or much less than that, actually. And that's coming off a really dry winter. And so, and even a harvest season last fall was pretty dry. So we're all kind of set up for a lot of drought across much of the state. So even though we are the most irrigated state in the country, anything that isn't under a sprinkler or has water is showing some drought stress on through harvest.
Well, that's an interesting question. To what degree does irrigation protect the state's yield? In other words, even in a severe drought, what kind of a crop will you have in Nebraska?
Well, if we go back to 2012, which was the last time we had drought like this, and that was probably a little bit worse. The irrigated crop, which is, around 9 million acres in Nebraska, so that's a lot of acres, did very well. The irrigated, but a lot of the pivots had to make 10 or 12 circles to get around to make the corn, what it was. And so, yeah, the crop was pretty good, but then the dryland falls way off. And in that year it was 0. This year, 40 and 50 bushels is going to catch a lot of dryland corn and less. And a lot of it has been chopped because we're a big livestock state. There's a lot of corn silage being put up, and it was put up really early this year.
Looking over the show side here, whether it's the forage or the corn that's standing out here, everything really looks good under the pivots.
Yes, under the pivots, and that's the savior in this state. We just don't get enough rain, and these pivots do a great job, and that's what saves us.
These field demos are quite an attraction. People love to come out and line up along the rope. Explain how that whole operation works. What are some of the key elements of parading those combines and tillage tools, tractors, grain carts, etc.?
Well, usually we have our main manufacturers, your Cases and your New Hollands and your Klaus, and then we'll go to the head companies like your Drago and Capello and the GTS, and then we got our auger wagons after that.
And once again, farmers can walk in after the machines have gone through, after they pass. They stay behind the rope during the passage, but then they can walk out and get a closer look.
Yeah, once the equipment makes a pass, we'll advance the pennants, and as soon as we say it's safe, you can get down and inspect it and stuff and see what kind of job it does, see if it's worth your money, see if it's not.
So it was a good year at Husker Harvest Days to show off irrigation equipment and all of the technology that supports it. By all means, Mike, farmers are thinking about dry conditions, having the kind of summer that they've had here in the western part of the Corn Belt.